just to sort of get into that a little bit, because I think it's really important what you said. I'm not saying that you should have obsessive focus with, okay, I'm a community advocate or I'm an SAP social media guru, so that's all I talk about. But I do think it's important to make a distinction between putting all of yourself out there in all of your facets, because it becomes confusing and overwhelming to people. And there is, let's face it, there's a too much information factor that comes in a lot of times. So I do share personal information about my life. But like, for example, I've done a lot of music journalism in my life. I don't push music all the time in my SAP feed and my thoughts about whether I thought Beyonce's latest album sucked, which it did. But I don't put all that stuff out there, because that's after a point that creates a level of confusion for why people are connecting with me. But on the other hand, on Friday night, I might post a few of my favorite YouTube videos, because it adds a little bit of a flavor. In a way, when you think about social media in a business context, you're letting people into your living room, not into your bedroom, right? But over time, you might go pick out some of your favorite artifacts from other parts of your life and bring it into your living room, and it creates a sort of intimacy. But I think it's a matter of authenticity to a point. But like I said, you're not putting everything out there. And I think making some conscious decisions about what you share and what you don't is important. And for people that are with companies, that's even more important. I mean, I'm JonERP. I only answer to myself, really, but a lot of people are not in that situation, and they have social media policies and guidelines they have to understand. And that's a whole different topic we don't have time for in this session.
I just wanted to develop what you said about the quality. When you create a personal brand, I see too many people doing retweets. They don't write blogs, they retweet things. And the second thing, they tweet about, I'm at the airport, I'm taking my plane is late, etc. Is that the whole thing they have to say? So making a very bad personal brand. And that's something that I see a lot. And that's why you need filters. I completely agree with you.
But I think that's where the objectives come in, and I think unfortunately some people think maybe, oh, my life is so important, you know, I'm taking a plane to an important customer, they want the world to know. That's for me is your personal brand. They're probably like that in their normal life. I mean, lately a lot of people have said social media is like high school. You'll meet all the characters, you'll find all the behavior, and I think it's totally true.
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think the one thing that, and I think you guys are talking a lot about brand and all that, I think, like, you know, like, especially in social media, like, there's this obsession about having a presence. And so, like, you know, like, the new trend is everyone has, like, this, like, you know, LOL cat type presence where they're all just goofy and they just want to be out there and be friendly so people like them. And I think that that's kind of the wrong direction. I think that, like, what Seth Godin talks about with tribes is really the direction you want to go in, and it really does come around creating quality content. It's not necessarily about you representing yourself, it's about the group that you surround yourself with in your social sphere. When you drive that kind of conversation, that conversation kind of defines who you are, what you're about, and that really is what helps create the quality content. When it's just you and you're thinking about your personal brand, you're kind of losing touch with that overall conversation that you're really trying to add to and build up. So it's really about focusing on your tribe and trying to gather that right group of people, and not so much about defining yourself.
I think that's really true, and I think that's the thing about influence. We were talking about the book Ignore Everybody earlier by Hugh McLeod, but it was a great treatise on this whole notion of churn off this notion of how many followers do I have, what is my cloud score, all that bullshit. It's completely meaningless. The only reason it has meaning is, unfortunately, some companies take this stuff into account, which is really sad, because clout only weighs Twitter influence, and even within Twitter, it does a fairly bad job. For example,
over time, it's a time. If you tweet a lot, your score's higher. I mean,
for example, like in the SAP space, I know someone who's got a fairly mediocre cloud score. I'm not going to expose in this podcast. who is one of the most trusted advisors in the entire ERP manufacturing space for customers and buyers. So he's the guy the customers call when they're trying to get advice on what vendor I'm going to buy, my next step. And all these vendors, if they're just monitoring based on cloud scores, they're not following this guy. And he's the one that's influencing purchasing decisions, not the kind of hack you're talking about that's constantly retweeting stuff and it's on the fringes of a popularity contest. And I think that's the demoralizing thing about this whole space, is that you get obsessed with this notion of popularity and follower counts and influence and clout and all that junk, and forget about what you're saying, which is it's about forming a tribe based on things that have an inherent value that you're passionately committed to. And, you know, one of the biggest social media bumps I ever got was a couple years ago when I wrote the white papers on SAP careers, where I was really rethinking the whole notion of what an SAP career strategy was. And what drove those papers, although I was paid a modest amount for it, but not nearly what it took me to do it, what drove it was the fact that I felt like I could really help a lot of a whole generation of professionals on trying to rethink how they envision their SAP skills going forward and the whole way SAP is evolving as a platform and everything. And so I put a lot of passion into that, and then people took care of the marketing for me because they thought I had value. And that, to me, that's the new marketing, which is no marketing at all. Just create stuff of value and then make yourself accessible so that people who want to engage with you. And so to me, it's in a way, it's fairly simple. I think where the complexities come in around policy and company participation. That's where it gets harder when you move. And also in terms of filtering. I mean, filtering is one of the really big issues right now. And for a person, it's much easier. For a company to figure out sentiment and how to participate in that conversation is an extremely difficult thing right now. Because then you're dealing with a whole other scale of volume of things you have to monitor. Like, can you imagine having, if you're work for SAP and social media and you have to...
It would be so hard. It would be so hard.
Like
but
Natasha,
John,
right?
I couldn't agree more with you. I'm so glad you're bringing that up, because it's one of my pet peeves when people say, oh, we need to do social media. You don't need to do social media. You need to figure out what are your business goals, what are you trying to achieve, what are you already doing, and how can social media help you with that, and maybe not. But don't say you just want to do social media. It makes no sense. And the whole measuring thing, I mean, okay, people have these reports and they measure sentiment, but is this all due to the social media activity? I mean, there's this whole offline activity and marketing and branding that's going on. It's the same problem as PR. People shouldn't get too caught into that. It's like you say with cloud. I mean, it's much more important what real people think about you.
Right.
I think there's a huge topic around how companies participate in social media in general. The fact that there is a credibility of people being participating in social media. It's set of people, but then you have a company that wants to be there. And the whole question of whether a company has a place to participate in that and how effectively, assuming you want to be effective and you really don't want to push your messages, you just want to credibly deliver value to your users. I think the fact that you're a company doesn't necessarily put you in a very good position, because you're sort of not playing the game as it was designed to play, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think so, because I often feel like an independent person like me has an inherent advantage on a social media platform. I don't have an advantage when it comes to selling software to corporations. SAP clearly has the advantage there. But as far as social media, I do, because I can speak in an authentic voice without having to run anything up a flagpole or worry about implications for product branding or even legal implications, right? And part of the problem with social media is that you can't just put window dressing on something that's inherently corrupt. If something is corrupt, it's going to get called out in that platform. And I use the phrase drive-by replies to talk about the dangers companies run into. We've all had this problem of engaging in a customer service type of conversation with a company, for example, where their pseudo-conversational participation almost made things worse. It'd almost be better if you knew you didn't matter to them than if they didn't actually understand your problem and solve your problem, right? So I think that's one of the really big concerns for companies, is that people, listening is fine for a little bit, but then follow-through comes into play. And listening's not going to be enough, right? Like, I want results. Right? Like, if I have a problem with my hotel room, like, I want someone to figure out what that problem was and resolve it, not to say, we're really sorry to hear about it, please send an email to blah, blah, blah.
United breaks the ties.
Yeah, or my favorite, please start following me so I can DM. No, I don't want to follow your brand. I want you to get someone who can solve my problem on the phone with me. So I think it's a big issue, because it seems cool to be on these platforms, but it unravels when you start looking at how do we follow through on that kind of engagement. So,
anyway. I think that's kind of, it's true for everyone, but especially for companies, I think it's important to listen and take care of those that are listening to you. And that's really where you get the best kind of bang for your buck. I mean, there was a story I read about Morton Steakhouse, where they heard about some guy coming off like a red eye, and he said, oh, I wish I had a steak and they actually met him at the airport with the steak. So there was all this logistics that went into them finding out what flight he was on and all that, and they did it in the time of his flights and met him with a meal.
And the anti-example is United Breaks Guitars. Are you?
Yes, everybody knows that one.
video, right? Where
So it's definitely like a make or break scenario where it's really about taking care of everyone else and then allowing them to speak for you. And I think that holds true for companies and people, but especially for companies. That's the thing they need to do with social media.
All right, so like everything in the expert lounge, it's always a hard, brutal stop because we got an important guy here, Harold Ryder, with an important. Let me guess, HANA session.
Hana, what else?
HANA, all HANA all the time.
We are
So
glad
let's
we
get
delayed
it on.
our lunch
Thanks for
for
joining
you.
us.
Thanks, John.
All right, later.